Mind Body Life show hosted by Frederick Entenmann on Global Voice Radio on Fridays at 10 a.m. Eastern. During his show, Mind Body Life founder and best-selling author Frederick Entenmann investigates the little-known insights and daily methods used to create explosive life transformations and transitions with those that have risen from struggle and ascended to greatness. Here is your Mind Body Life host, Frederick Entenmann.
Welcome to the Mind Body Life show. I am your host, Frederick Entenmann. This is episode 11. I am a former professional athlete, a best-selling author of Surviving Sports in the Game of Life, a coach and consultant, and I help athletes win the game of life. I want to welcome you to episode 11. And what I'm going to do is discuss more in depth of how athletes, professional athletes, can win the game of life. And I'm going to further investigate common outcomes and concepts of life after sport and common issues and emotional well-being of professional athletes post-sport. Because I was once a professional basketball player, and I went through many, many years after a sudden injury, which sidelined me from continuing as a professional athlete. And I went through a couple years of massive depression, and I didn't exactly know that was coming. It almost seemed like a cliff. And all too often, we actually see elite professional athletes suddenly go from the spotlight of the world and have this seemingly great success through the eyes of others. And then next thing we know, they're on the news with rather disturbing news. It happens all the time. And this has kind of led me to my path to establish Mind Body Life and become the founder and CEO and owner of this brand, because it's my passion and purpose to help athletes win the game of life. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually start with a couple former professional athletes from Britain that I was able to get through networking, and just start with a little introspection for those that might want to see a little deeper into just how a professional athlete, once they become vulnerable, I'm so lucky for these two to share what actually is going through our minds and what we experience. I think a lot of people think us as professional athletes, we are machines without emotions sometimes. But I'm going to start with someone named Jess, who was a full-time Great Britain athlete, track and field, who retired as a result of stress for 5 years and fought depression and attempted several comebacks, only to be wiped out by depression for no apparent reason, as it was going very well. So I'm going to quote unquote here. I can't really even begin to describe how disappointing it all was, as I had a great belief I was destined for the Olympic glory. And if I just tried, quote unquote, one more time, my mind would let up and I could push through the stress and pressure after all facing anxiety gets through it, right? Question mark. I tried again recently to no avail. To add insult to injury, through my illness, I developed late onset of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, which combined with retirement left me seriously contemplating suicide. On my first retirement, I got a part-time job, and I hated it. I'd grown up with packed stadiums, speed, a schedule which I chose, and in the end, I quit my job because I was horrified at how dissatisfying it was and couldn't, for the rest of me, understand why anyone would want to do that. I felt for years that the world had interrupted in my God-given destiny to win the Olympic Games. Oh, the injustice. I was for years holding my head in my hands thinking, crap, I need to be a major success in something to replace or avenge what was taken from me. I was baffled as to how some of my role models worked through the worst issues, and I was devastated by my brain because it would not just pull itself together for all the affirmation and fighting through tough times in the world. After my worst bout of illness, I discovered art as therapy. I also discovered poetry and dancing. I'm 30 now and want to see how far I can go in one of these areas, but regardless of my successes or failures, the main point is I've found other pursuits I can enjoy and express the fire and energy and ambition I had in the sport. Of course, sometimes I reflect on sport and think I should have pursued a creative career earlier. But I have full belief in myself that I can do this regardless of my age and that this will still happen because I possess enough talent, and I recently got a coach to help me through these steps as well. I truly believe in my gift is art, poetry, drama, etc. I will still discover it with time and effort. I can also work part-time now, feeling I'm throwing my life away so somebody is in a high chair somewhere can exploit my time. I still feel that nobody should have to do anything they're not passionate about, though I accept sometimes there's a middle ground where some of your time is okay to just be okay with doing something a bit mundane, so long as it pays well enough to eat good food and buy the things necessary for your own pursuits. But in the midst of all this, I have realized I am valuable without all the successes, and that I could perhaps live without my destiny being to be world famous or a huge success, blah, blah, blah. There's an element of growth and acceptance in athletic retirement. And with perseverance and openness to growth and possibility, the retired athlete can still win, even if for a few years they felt life left them with nothing but themselves. Even if you end up happy working in a little shop, you're still worth it. Just for being your own personality, and things will change again when it is your time again. Change is inevitable. You have to be open to it. We as athletes ended up there because we are driven, talented, and ambitious. So have faith you will find something where that continues. Understand you may feel angry, raged, hopeless, like you were denied of your true potential, but also understand you'll have other skills and pursuits you can be equally successful in, and who knows. But as long as you pursue those with the same vigor as you did your sport, just remember personal accountability is irreplaceable. Go get a coach just like you did with your sport. Final tip, post-retirement, go traveling, go to lots of classes to find out what you like. Find out how people live and find where you belong for this next chapter. Thank you very much to wow, what a testimonial and insight for my show, because that really helps to get someone else. Jess, I really appreciate it. I, like many other athletes, can attest. It's almost like you feel like you're on this island once your sport ends. And I also want to go in real quick to Deb Rose, who's a former professional runner in her 50s, and she explains life after sport as this. Let's face it, when you've been an athlete your whole life, once an athlete, always an athlete. For me, hitting that lovely age of 50, my mind still is that athlete back in the day, but my body isn't. Everything is harder. Trying to get back into shape or stay in shape isn't as easy. It's a mind warp. You always think of your glory days. But now the reality is we're tired, overworked, kids this and that, finances, the list goes on and on. What kind of goals does one possibly set at this time in their lives? ? I don't know. I've often wondered how other athletes feel. How do they handle retirement? Am I different? What are they doing? What am I doing? What do you do with guys who sit on your shoulders telling you how you used to be able to do this? All the coaches that used to be there for you, and that now you can't. So I feel like I suck. I'm in that place in my life, and I hate it. Hate it. What does one do at the age of mid-50s? Having always been a goal setter, affirmations, getting better in my sport was always the focus. What goals do you set? in the mid-50s, question mark. How does one recreate that passion, question mark. I've tried to be normal. I worked in an office. I actually enjoyed the work, but sitting in a cube for 8 hours every day is painful. I watch people around me that come in and day out, work or not work, but they seem just fine with it. I am not fine with it. I just can't sit for 8 hours. Yet when you need the money, you make lots of sacrifices. What I know is I'm sacrificing myself, life, my spirit, my soul. So to not think about it, I self-medicate. It works. It makes the noise quiet down, lets me forget about stuff, but it doesn't work for very long because I get antsy and frustrated and on the verge of addiction. Why can't I wake up every morning jacked up for the day? How does one find their passion again? I'd love to know what other athletes have done with life after sport. Now, thank you so much, Deb Rose, is a former professional runner, also from Great Britain. Really two incredible individuals that are willing to be vulnerable and share their stories. I really appreciate it. And it leads me on further to delve deeper into this very issue. As far as I know, I am the pioneer on this ship, and I'm the only one in the world willing to work with athletes and create a whole new life for them. And you heard Deb, she actually is in her mid-50s and still doesn't know what to do. But thank goodness she went out and took the appropriate actions and got herself a coach and consultant. So I'd love to kind of deconstruct life after sport, because it's often said that a sports star will die twice. The first time at retirement, and for elite athletes who've dedicated their life to sport, what happens when your time comes to an end? If you aren't an athlete, then who are you? And I see it all the time. These athletes that claim they don't need to work on themselves if they're going through their career, and they find out when it's too late that, oh gosh, the sport really doesn't define me. And so, elite athletes, we train extensively for years and years and years on end. In many cases, consumes the majority of our young lives, and often making just absolute extensive personal sacrifices in order to pursue the dreams of glory. And whether this may include making huge financial sacrifices or moving away from family to train full-time in academies, or calling time on academic studies and sacrificing personal or even romantic or social relationships. That's really me. In high school, I didn't have a girlfriend. Okay, I went to dances, so on and so forth, but I didn't go to parties. I didn't really have much of a social life because it was 24/7. I was eating and sleeping basketball, and I made the appropriate sacrifices to make sure I met those goals. And I know I'm not the only one in the boat. To reach that 1%, it's necessary. That's what the athlete does. We sacrifice our formative years and our minds and bodies. And for many athletes, retirement is a concept that they don't wish to even think about or even go there in great detail. However, whether they've achieved Olympic glory or failed to reach the pinnacle in their sport that they had aspired to, all athletes' careers will eventually come to a close, whether that's through age, injury, or exhaustion. That's the inevitable end of the road in the overall truth, which takes a whole new preparation for the athlete, which now needs to be brought to light, which is, again, my purpose. Now, what happens to these athletes once they leave the days filled with rigorous training and the extensive time spent traveling and the buzz and adrenaline of competing? How are you going to replicate that? This is the time in an athlete's life where they may be susceptible to absolute depression, as we heard before. I actually have a quote from Team GB Olympic champion cyclist Victoria Pendleton as well, who expressed her extreme relief of retirement after the London Games. And she cited that she couldn't wait to go on to the new ventures in her life and is much happier now that the pressure of competing was no longer a burden. Now, that is the absolute top if you're an Olympian. However, not all athletes will enter retirement with such ease and willingness, as I believe she faced burnout and the fire in the belly was no longer there. But many will struggle with adapting to a regular life, where they're no longer in the limelight and perhaps in the eyes suddenly become forgotten members of society. Sport on that level, it feeds into ego. In sport career termination induces dramatic changes in athletes' personal, social, and the obvious in occupational life. This can turn potentially, it can affect individuals cognitively, emotionally, and behaviorally. Trust me, I went through all that, and it was ugly because I wasn't prepared or didn't think about that or what was coming. The social and professional changes induced by retirement from sport can, in effect, cause major distressful reactions. And these retired athletes almost always express a feeling of emptiness in their lives. And one of the main stakes of this transition is to therefore reconstruct and adjust themselves on the basis of a brand new lifestyle. The transition that is made by professional athletes from a full-time athletic career to that of retirement has received considerable comments already in sports media. However, it's only in recent years that it's really warranted formal academic study. And the actual transition is often found to be difficult because of the sudden, it's the cessation of intense demands of elite athletic performance, and then compounded by the sudden loss of the athlete's quite intense devotion to the professional athletic competition and its attendant rewards. That's really how an elite athlete is wired. We put in the time for the reward on the utmost competitive, highest level. It's also common knowledge with my research, multiple Olympic swimming champion Ian Thorpe, Celtic FC manager Neil Lennon, and double Olympic champion Dame Kelly Holmes are just a few of the high-profile athletes who've recently and openly, publicly, made their post-athletic career depression public after their retirement from professional sport. And I'm not talking about being blue and down. I'm talking about clinically depressed. I was in that boat, but I brought myself out, and I'm happy as a lark these days because I figured out my true life's passion and purpose, which again, I teach athletes. It ties into teaching them how to win the game of life so they get to that point. Andrew Flintoff, Paul Gascoigne, and Frank Bruno are a further few have been affected by the mental illness and have been open and willing to share their issues to help raise the profile of depression and athletic retirement. I also love boxing legends Sugar Ray Leonard's life story. He famously quoted, "Nothing could satisfy me outside the ring. There's nothing in life that can compare to becoming a world champion, having your hand raised in that moment of glory with thousands, seemingly millions of people cheering you on." And that quote's it's right on, actually. Leonard's struggles with retirement were very well documented, and also leading him to suffer from extreme bouts of depression, and it explains why he eventually made repeated comebacks. However, for some, the depression becomes all too encompassing, and over the years, there have been a number of cases of athletes actually committing suicide following their retirement from professional sport. And it might seem a little ugly and extreme, but it's true. It's kind of the hyper next step. This actually includes the shocking story of Russian judoka Elena Ivashenko, who was believed to have committed suicide actually following the depression brought on by her failure to win gold at the 2012 London Olympic Games. So what exactly is it that often leads retired professional athletes to spiral into depression once they leave the days filled with rigorous training, the pressure of competition, and the glory days behind them? One main thing is loss of identity. If I go back where I said countless time and time again, athlete really thinks the sport defines them. An individual's identity may contain numerous dimensions. However, it is possible for one in particular to become dominant or preferred, and a lens through which the others are viewed. Athletic identity is described as the degree to which an individual identifies with the athletic role and looks to others for acknowledgement of that role. So the neglect or atrophy of other roles as a consequence of the ascendancy of a single role may therefore expose the individual to subsequent identity issues. I hope that makes sense. But it's been hypothesized that the loss of a preferred or dominant role may actually subsequently affect a person's overall self-concept of themselves. And I know that's raw psychology. I went to school. I have 4 degrees from very elite institutions, and I actually worked on my PhD as well. So research is no problem for me. There's actually been identified that individuals with a high athletic identity, at the time of retirement are more likely to experience a higher degree of emotional adjustment difficulties. And Bill Cole, a world-renowned peak performance coach who's worked with many, many athletes who've struggled to come in terms with their retirement, Bill noted that an important factor was this profound sense of loss in their lives that athletes may experience after putting their competing days behind them. And I quote Bill because he's a great guy, and he's also one of the beginning pioneers in this realm. Another issue is actually tunnel vision syndrome, which I will refer to. A tunnel vision syndrome affects many, many athletes to varying degrees at some stages of their careers, actually. And it's often the case that coaches or parents and professional sports agents and GMs or general managers are able to see it in. However, athletes who are unaware that they suffer from this tunnel vision spend far too much time thinking only of the training or the competition and then the results. And as a result, athletes are consequently left ill-prepared for the balanced perspective required of real-world career opportunities. And I'll go to Britain's double Olympic rowing champion, James Cracknell, who stated, "I think people suffer from depression after retiring from sport because they aren't sure where to apply that focus. There's a lot of focus and a lot of selfishness, egomaniacs in elite sportsmen." I couldn't agree more, James. And that's actually what gets in the way is elite athletes' ego. After all, the ego is based off of survival, and at such an elite competitive environment on that level, it only becomes stronger with professional athletes. So athletes often can't see their lives following another career path. And as soon as the dreaded retirement looms, with this brings an utter void that the comfort of a training routine once filled. There are also potential biological factors. And I'll go back to Bill Cole, who also noted the importance that biological factors may play in an athlete who's struggling in their retirement. Athletes have had regular doses of serotonin daily for many, many years. All that training, all of that extreme devotion and concentration, it just releases those hormones of it, and on the highest level on a daily basis. And then when this is suddenly decreased or stopped outright, we see a huge upset in the chemistry or the physiology of the body. A causal link between an imbalance in serotonin levels and depression has been explored by a number of researchers. However, more research in retired athletes actually poses exploration. It just needs more research in that area because it's not a given. So you might be asking, what's next? There's a number of ways that athletes can help to reduce the chances of depression after retirement from sport and prepare themselves. And these include, reducing your exclusive identification with your sporting role and expanding your self-identity to other pursuits. That's what I work on. That's what I coach. That's what I consult. I teach how to do this. It's my mind, body, life philosophy. I teach athletes how to discover interests and competences for other activities beyond their sport. Perhaps even considering coaching or the mentoring of other athletes because they've been there. And it's also acquiring stress management and time management skills, because such skills will represent tools that help an athlete better reconcile sport with their other roles. They also encourage strong relationships with coaches and family and friends and managers who actually care about the athlete or professional athlete, your sporting success, as well as your personal growth. Because being supported by significant others to consider other avenues in life will actually help you keep an open mind and diversify your identity. So lastly on my list is actually consulting with, if it really goes this deep for you, you need to consult with someone beyond myself, like an actual sports psychologist, to help explore further avenues of adaptation, psychological adaptation techniques, which is certainly more clinical. But otherwise, if you want to prepare for life, I'm your man. To end, this has been an incredible episode. I'm thoroughly enjoying opening this up. Athletes by nature, again, are mentally tough individuals that are often perceived by the public to be fitter and healthier and happier than others. Our opportunities are extreme. You hear of NBA, NFL, worldwide soccer players, hockey, baseball, it goes on and on. But now we have athletes signing for over $100 million. It's in getting all these other ancillary components as well, from whether it's a shoe company or supplement company or whatever the case may be. It just keeps adding up. But it's this attitude and stereotyping that can make it more difficult for us professional athletes to approach someone for help. And therefore, it's highly important for close family and friends and teammates and coaches to understand that a lower time or even depression cannot always be seen. And during extreme bouts of pressure, or when everything comes to an end, and you're faced with that transition, and the athlete may indeed never admit to how they even feel for fear or shame and embarrassment. The most important take-home message is to understand that despite athletes' incredible success in their hard-fought, dedicated careers, the process of retirement is a difficult one. Transition back into life is an extremely difficult one. And it's in this time that social support and communication is of extreme vital importance if the athlete is to avoid the dreaded post-retirement blues. I'm Frederick Intamin. I'm the founder and CEO of Mind Body Life. If you are a professional athlete or if you know a professional athlete, please share this with them. Please send them my way. It is my passion and purpose to support, coach, and consult with professional athletes and make sure they're winning at the game of life. You can find me on Instagram. I am the Mind Body Life Entrepreneur, also known as Frederick Intamin. I'm on Facebook as Frederick Intamin. Please feel free to join Team Mind Body Life. All you have to request. I will gladly put you into the group. You can look me up professionally on LinkedIn if you want to hook up professionally and business-wise. And please look out the end of this month. The rough date is actually February 20th that my next book is coming out, and that's called Wake Up, Living a Vibrant Life, which will most likely be a number one bestseller. So again, it's been great. Have a wonderful week. Until next week, take care.
Thank you for joining us. Listen every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern to Frederick Intamin host Mind Body Life. Connect with Frederick at www.globalvoiceradio.com. Tune in next week for another edition of Mind Body Life on Global Voice Radio.